What's something you're pretty sure has only happened to you? I once ran over a squirrel with my bike. I'm an animal person and I immediately felt terrible and stopped my bike. I ran back to go check on it. His little body was just laying there in the path. I went to poke it and the little bastard jumped up and bit me. The squirrel was playing possum. Side note. Rabies shots suck. When I was 9, a chipmunk ran through my bicycle spokes while I was going down a hill. It was too fast to react, but I clearly watched him sprint at my wheel and neatly leap through the spinning death wires. Somewhere, there's a very old chipmunk adventurer, dodging swinging axes or something. I opened my wallet and a moth flew out. Like in cartoons when a person is broke. My daughter went through a money phase when she was young. She had taken about $600 in cash out of my wallet and replaced it with a single Ritz cracker. I'm at a department store trying to buy a shirt. Open up my wallet. Pull out the cracker and say "Do you accept Ritz?" Double quote. My daughter meanwhile is at swimming lessons across town with my dad. I call my dad. He opens up the little purse she's been toting all over town. She's got over $1,000 in it. That's when we found out she hit up grandma's purse as well. A live bird fell on my head while I was sleeping. Twice. In completely unrelated incidents. I was inside in both. Edit. Due to request. Both times they flew through an open window at night and crashed into the window I was sleeping next to. I did the only thing any normal person would do both times. I screamed like a little girl. I caught both birds. One was a middle-sized dark thing, middle of the night. No light. Drunk, and the other a pigeon. And released them. They were both fine. Was reading a book about a serial killer. Turned over the page to see a picture of my house. The serial killer was my former landlord. Eater. He was the most prolific serial killer in recorded history. At the time I rented his former childhood home from him. He wasn't known to be a murderer. I didn't know him personally. It was through an estate agent. The poop hit the fan about 2 years after I left that house. I was sitting in my new home reading a book about him and just saw the picture of my former home. He was born and raised there and both of his parents died in the kitchen and living room there. He left at 17 to go to medical school in Leeds. Edit. About 250 victims. The book was Prescription for Murder by Brian Whittle and John Ritchie. My wife and I were in a casino and she sat down to play video poker. After only 4 hands she hits a royal flush for $4,000. The casino workers come to pay her out and a lady next to my wife also playing video poker sees it and asks my wife, "Can I rub your shoulder real fast before I play my next hand so I'll get a royal flush too?" Double quote. My wife and I look at each other very weirded out but my wife didn't want to come off rude. So she shrugs and says, "Sure." Double quote. The lady awkwardly rubs my wife's shoulder. Hits deal. And gets a royal flush. Also $4,000. All 3 casino workers. Myself. My wife. And a couple nearby players just stood there with our jaws dropped. I'm not a superstitious man but what the fuck. Under bombardment in Baghdad in 2004. A Chinese-made Katyusha rocket landed 30 feet away and blew me up. I stood up. Dusted myself off. And discovered I was completely unhurt. As I was marveling at this, I watched another rocket come in. I knew from its parabola that my luck was up. And stood rooted to the spot. Horrified. As it came down nose first about 5 feet away from me. I've never been so certain that my life was over. It failed to explode. I dated a woman in high school who left me senior year because she discovered she was gay. After college. A different woman also left me because she said she was gay. Both those women left me for the same woman. Either you're just awful at the sex or that particular lady is so amazing it crosses sexual boundaries. I choose to believe both of those are true. I talked in my sleep when I was about 3 or 4. And said the phrase "it's cold. Whose pumpkin is this?" It became a recurring joke in my family. When I was 19, I got a ride home from college with a friend. It was around the beginning of October. We got out of the car at her house. We were picking up her sister before she took me home. And she exclaimed, "It's cold." Then looked at a pumpkin on the porch and said, "Whose pumpkin is this?" Double quote. I was riding horses with some friends on a beach in Mexico. When we stopped and sat around on our horses to take a break from running, my friend's horse mounted my horse. My friend jumped off, but my leg got stuck through the stirrup on the side opposite the one I tried to jump from, effectively trapping me between the two horses until they were done with each other and me. While standing on my leg, the top horse decided to bite at me instead of at the other horse, as they are known to do during situations such as these. So, picture this. Two horses doing it like they do on the Discovery Channel. An 18-year-old girl stuck between them, leaning as far off to one side as possible, while repeatedly punching the horse in the head to prevent it from biting her. Eventually they finished and the top horse backed off long enough for me to free myself and fall to the ground before they started at it again. I scrambled around in the sand to get out from under them, and after they finished once more, they turned and ran away down the beach, luckily back to where we had rented then from, where the owners caught them. From what I hear, this is not a common experience on missions trips. TLDR. Was an unwilling participant in an equestrian menage a cute choice. When I was 11 and into magic so I could get all the ladies, I was holding a quarter in my left hand and tapped it with my right. When I opened my left hand, there was no quarter there. Nobody was in the house with me. I don't know why I wasn't masturbating. And I was freaking the FCK out for the next 2 hours. It was nowhere around me, and it couldn't have flown across the room. Edit. After I discovered it disappeared, I decided to look in my clothes for the answer. I took off all my clothes and shook them. Nothing fell out. I went into anaphylactic shock at an S&M party and woke up 2 days later in the hospital, where they had to cut off, IDK how they did it, the collar I was wearing. Cause it was locked on and my throat had swelled up so bad. I found out later that some rich dude in a sports car had NASCAR'd me all the way to the ER. Since the ambulance probably wouldn't have gotten there in time, I have pretty much no recollection of it. All I remember is not being able to breathe. But I'm glad I didn't die, because that would have been weird to explain in the obituary. She died at an S&M party after suffocating from accidental exposure to bananas. What a way to go out. I killed a car with a McDonald's cup laying in the road. I ran over it. It somehow got sucked up into the fan belt or something. Snapped it. My husband said I had to be the only one that had ever happened to. I try not to run over anything in the road anymore thinking it's harmless. If I do have to, I check the mirror to make sure it's still there. 1 year. After a Halloween party a friend and I were walking home late, and we walked by another party house. In the front yard a few douchey frat types were talking loudly outside, and they get real quiet. Then the big one is like, "Hey, watch this." My buddy was a real small guy in a matador outfit, and who the hell knows what I was dressed as other than it involved a monkey puppet, which at the time was concealed. Dude walks up and looms, and yells, "Give me all your f-king money." So, whiskey drunk me, still in puppet mode, raises the puppet to his face and yells, "You give me all your money," on the f-king ground. Now, dude just laid down and handed me his wallet. I promptly took it with the puppet and made it rain all over his ass. TLDR. Possibly the only turnaround puppet mugging in human history. Edit. FCK that comma. In particular, I have the best words. We Estonians celebrate Street Catherine's Day as a lot of children dress themselves as women and perform an act of some kind, or sing, for delicious candy. So I was doing a handstand on my neighbor's house lobby. Suddenly I felt an urge to fart. And as the lobby was pretty small room we were all close to each other. So I pretty much farted on my neighbor's face as I was doing handstand. It got pretty awkward but they gave me delicious candy for it. So basically I received candy for farting on my neighbor's face. I was eating spinach dip on a patio with my girlfriend and her family when I realized I had dropped a glob on my shirt. Naturally, I scooped the mess off my shirt with another pitter and ate it only to realize it was not spinach dip at all. A bird had shat on me. To this day I only use napkins to wipe messes off myself, even if I'm indoors. As a kid, like 10 or 12, on a school trip to Washington DC, I was walking along the mall and found a puffy envelope laying on the ground. I picked it up. It had a congressman's letterhead, though maybe it was cash. I looked around, but no one was anywhere near me. Opened it up. It was full of weed. Hungover me decided to buy a slice of pizza one day at King's Cross. Now this particular slice was roughly the size of my face and had a good solid weight. No measly portion. With my mind solely focused on getting some greasy food in my belly, I decided to eat it on the go and took the slice and walked out the store. You not friends. I was barely 2 steps out the front door when I go in for my first bite and bam, out of nowhere a giant crow appears from behind and in one fell swoop snagged my gloriously greasy pizza and bolted. To top it off, it flew to a roof across the street and performed what I can only assume was some kind of sick taunting ritual. Maybe I'm not the only person for this to happen to, but this felt like the adult version of losing your scoop 2 seconds out of the ice cream store, and I'm just hoping someone can relate. When I was 7, I fell off the ladder on the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea's boat. I landed on a giant clam his bodyguard had fished from 20 meters below, cutting a giant gash into my foot. I am allergic to shellfish. His bodyguard carried me 5 kilometers, barefoot, to the nearest aid post. By the time we arrived, my eyes had swollen and I was unable to see while simultaneously having a minor asthma attack. I was then held down on a table by my father as the local nurse sewed me up without painkillers. 10 stitches. A few years ago I was in a really bad place one night and decided to take a walk and see where I end up. About 30 minutes in, a car pulls up beside me and 3 girls jump out and give me some flowers, telling me to cheer up and everything will be alright. One of the girls even offered for me to come with them, but another girl said something so I declined. I kept those flowers on my desk for almost a month before I threw them out. It was by far one of the strangest things I have ever experienced. I know it was probably some prank or a dare, but that still does not change how much it touched me that day. http imgur comvxbj0ne jpg. I was riding my Razor scooter around my front yard as a kid. There was a notorious bit of uneven sidewalk that I forgot about and the tiny, incapable wheels made impact and I flipped over the front. I was shaken but generally okay. I go to wipe a tear from my face and as I open my hand a butterfly flew out of it. I was playing with a clear plastic beader in high school craft class. It was small. Think like maybe 1/3 the size of a pearl. I got bored and wandered out to the balcony. As I stepped out the door, I threw the bead over arm out into the courtyard. Except that on its way out, it nicked the bottom of the awning that came down only about 2 centimeters from the roof and I swear, bounced back to me and landed directly in my hand, which was still in the process of swinging down from the throw. I was gobsmacked. I just walked back into class and sat down quietly, knowing that even if I told someone they'd never believe me. To this day, it remains the most impressive thing I've ever done. And I've never told this to anyone until now. I was at work, went to the bathroom and saw my DCK was purple and swollen and freaked the FCK out. I immediately went to the urgent care where I found out it was just a bruise from rough sex. And since it's such a vascular region, bruises tend to look really nasty but are harmless. The weird part was the doctor started flicking my DCK from side to side and then said, "Sorry. It's been a while since I've seen one of these." Double quote. She also made more than one follow-up call to see how I was doing. I've mentioned this before but it definitely fits. I was having sex with my girlfriend after showering together and I had water stuck in my ear. Then right as I came, my ear popped and water came out. The combination of an orgasm and an ergasm was the most bizarre but amazing sensation ever, and I have never met anyone else that has had the same experience. I was pitching in a baseball game and there was a runner on second. The batter hit a very hard ground ball back to me, took a bad hop, and hit me square in the cup, the protector for your junk. Now just because you are wearing a cup doesn't mean there is no pain when you get hit. It f***ing hurt. But I kept the ball in front of me and threw the batter out at first. Well, since I paid no attention to the runner on second, he ran for third base when I threw the batter out. My first baseman lunged off the bag and tried to throw him out at third. Well, I was in his way. He planted a fastball right in the middle of my shoulder blades. And that's how I got hit twice in one play. 3 guys, one with a knife, once decided to mug me while I was playing on swings at the park. They didn't want to approach while I was actually swinging. So I got stuck in a surreal real-life minigame where I had to keep going on a swing in order to stay alive. I got attempted RP by a drunk raccoon in Florida. It was drinking my beer on the shores of the Indian River where I was fishing. I never fished, ever, or even saw a raccoon in real life. So I tried to get the beer from it. It seemed cool. So I started to pet it and it immediately clamped onto my leg, furiously humping me. I was screaming for help. My friend was a pro fisherman who dropped his cell phone in the water trying to film it. He was laughing. I had to go to the hospital on the 4th of July and even the maintenance workers want to see me, the dumbest Yankee New Yorker. At age 21 my HR rate went really high after I had a drink, probably spiked, in Berkeley. I passed out and was clinically dead for 2 minutes. I woke up in Stanford Hospital and got a defibrillator implanted in my chest a few days later. Then the defibrillator malfunctioned over the next 4 years, shocking me internally with 47 joules more than 30 times. The battery died and I begged an electrocardiologist to remove it rather than change the battery. He had never heard of one being removed in someone my age. He took a huge risk and jeopardized his career by removing the defibrillator. I have been totally healthy and problem-free for the last 12 years. I got screwed out of $50 by this guy one time. This elderly guy came up to me and asking for help. He needed money for gas to get him and his wife across the state. We were about an hour from the state line. He didn't want money for nothing, and had a bunch of used tools in his truck that he said I could buy off of him. I didn't need any tools, and happened to have a $50 bill my very racist grandma gave me that I was looking to use for a good cause. And I'm a bit of a goof, so I had a fun idea. So I asked him for a single screw, the fastener, not sex. He looked at me dumbfounded, and I had to repeat myself and assure him of what I said a few more times. He asked me why and I told him so I could say I got screwed out of $50 by this guy one time. He couldn't believe it and sure enough, I got a tiny screw, the fastener, damn it. And he got $50. Whether he used it on gas or meth, I didn't really care. He looked like a guy in need regardless. My brother was there with me and his eyes went wide. I told him that money is a funny thing. If you give it away, it'll come back to you. He thought this was the dumbest thing I'd ever done. Then, less than a week later, I got a one-time bonus from my car insurance company for having such a great record. The bonus amount? $53. Hope this gets seen. Made an account just to share this story. When I was in middle school, one of the girls in my class had a birthday party at a local arcade that had a putt-putt course. Me and my friend were the only 2 people playing. After we were getting bored of it, we just started f***ing around. When we get to a new hole, my friend lines up his first shot and just slams it as hard as he can. Hard enough that it hits one of the barriers, ricochets out of the green, hits a bush, trickles down some stairs, falls back onto the green, hits 2 walls and goes in. This was roughly 15 years ago and I still remember the exact look on his face as we both jumped up and yelled holy shit at the top of our lungs. One of my favorite memories growing up was a series of things that happened in the span of a week, but it was movie quality unbelievable. I lost my job, Had to send my drum kit back I was leasing that I was only $200 short of paying off completely. My bike broke going to hand out resumes. I came home to find a tax bill from the government for $2,000+. I got food poisoning and exploded from the inside out. The girl I had a giant crush on for like a year started dating a guy who looked kinda like me and has the same name as me. And then when I went to get my mind off stuff and watch my favorite show, WWE Monday Night Raw, I tuned in to find out my favorite wrestler had blown out his knee and would be out for 9 months. I was once on a plane next to Donny Osmond and halfway through the flight he turns to me and speaks the words, "If this stewardess ignores me one more time I swear I am never going to fly on this airline again." Anyway, the stewardess obviously had a beef with Donny Osmond because she wasn't even looking at him, let alone talking to him. The flight continues quieter as he falls to sleep. When he is out for the count, the stewardess comes over to me and apologizes for her uncle's behavior. The reason she wasn't speaking to him was that apparently he screwed his brother out of a bunch of money on a deal and forced the family to get service jobs. He was taunting his own niece in the job she had to take because he basically screwed out of her inheritance. What a guy. Last year I had to cut my iPad out of my bathroom with a drywall saw. Basically, the apartment I lived in had a lofted bed that was just a platform above the bathroom. I had my iPad up there while watching a movie. And it turns out that there was a space about 1/4 inch wide between where the wall met the platform. Craftsmanship was not the greatest. Well, my iPad fell about 8 feet down into the wall of the bathroom. And caught on the casing of the wall outlet. I was able to determine where in the wall the iPad was by FaceTiming myself from my iPhone. Once I had a pretty good idea, I sawed a 9 by 9 inches hole in the wall and retrieved my device. It was banged up, but still works to this day. So yeah, I am pretty sure no one has ever had to perform drywall surgery on their bathroom to retrieve the iPad that they dropped from their bed. I was test driving a new truck years back and had the salesman with me as we rode around. I was approaching a stop sign when I suddenly hit 2 separate opossums. One under each front tire. He freaks out and jumps in the driver's seat and says that's going to be a mess to clean up. We need to get it back to the dealership before the detail shop closes. He was a buddy of mine, so I was like, cool. Well, as he's speeding back we fly by 2 state troopers. They attempted to pull us over as this guy lays on the gas. I'm now freaking out like we're going full OJ now and plead with him to stop and pull over. We're doing about 90 miles per hour now in a 35 zone when he decided to try and jump into the passenger's seat while I'm still sitting in it. I said, "What the FCK are you doing, man?" And he screams, "I don't have a license." I push him back into his seat as the truck almost drives off the road. In his panic he drops what I thought was regular medicine. Nope. He spills at least 2 bottles of ecstasy and Xanax all over the truck floors. I knew then we were FK'd. He finally pulls over. Cops rip him out of the truck as he's trying to lie to them, and they tell me that I am responsible for the truck and getting it back to the dealership now. I prayed they didn't see the plethora of drugs all over the floor. They didn't. I ended up driving the truck back to the nearest Toyota dealership and they had a driver take me back home. He was arrested on the spot and lost his job. I wonder whoever found all those pills. Maybe the detail guys had a great weekend? Lol. And you all thought this was about the slim odds of me killing 2 opossums at once. Nah. When I was a tad bit drunk with one of my buddies in backwards WV, we were sitting on his tailgate just f***ing around. I guess we were both looking at the ground too long that when we looked up there was a f***ing herd of cows crossing the road. Literally 7-8 cows, and we didn't even hear them or see them from about 40 yards away. Edit for clarity. I live near a farm and then spent the next 3 hours herding those fucker back. Probably walked over 4 mountains and thick underbrush before I was finished. Alright. This is one I've shared before in a different sub. My fiancée and I were doing it and I was going down on her and fingering her butt. Things were pretty heated and I accidentally pulled my fingers from her butt, and when I tried to thrust them back and I missed and rammed one of my fingers up my own nostril. Cue bloody nose. Blood spraying as I'm laughing and going up. And a trip to the bathroom to stop the bleeding. After everyone and everything was cleaned up, we finished. 3 stories. When I was in 3rd grade, I got home from school and wanted to watch TV. I was wearing tight jeans, so I took them off and 2 wasps, one in each individual leg, sprung out and flew around, in which I screamed. I also had an afro when I was younger. And in 5th grade during dodgeball, I had a bee of some kind get stuck in the matting of my hair and my coach had to pick it out, in which I also screamed. When I had my afro, my parents always joked they could fit anything inside it. So eventually it became tradition to take the crayons they give you at restaurants and steal them through my hair. I always thought this was funny, so I played along. But once I forgot about a red crayon stuck right on top of my head and took a shower in which it dripped all down my face and I screamed. Met my now future wife on Tinder on the one night she was bored and decided to give it a try. She lived 3 blocks from me, worked 2 blocks from me, and we traversed the same path to work and home each day for a year before we actually met via Tinder. Our paths were just minutes apart. A different life is literally just minutes apart. Okay, no one is going to believe this, but here goes. We were cutting up fish at our cabin by the sea. A flock of ever-present seagulls lurked nearby and fought for the spoils as they always do. This one bold fucker wobbled up and ate the F-King knife while no one used it. It's one of those cheap-ass knives with a colorful plastic handle. He ate it handle first and gobbled it down, so the F-King blade was sticking out of its dumb little face. All the other little fuckers noticed that the little guy had something and they wanted in on it too. So they approached him in numbers and, I swear, he fought them off. He was waving his head around using the blade as a sort of face sword. After valiantly fighting off his friends, he flew off awkwardly into the bright summer evening. We could see the bright reflection from his face from the sun as he flew off into eternity. Poor dude. He probably died later on. Luckily I wasn't alone. We were all gobsmacked. While doing a summer semester in Seoul in college, my now wife dropped her umbrella on my foot while we were waiting for a train in the metro. As a reflex, I kicked my foot and hurdled my sandal onto the tracks. The metro employees stopped the entire station, including incoming trains, and some man with a pole fished my sandal off the tracks and gave it back to me. As he bowed, giving me my sandal back, some 300 Koreans clapped and some even wanted pictures with me. Really embarrassing and certain I'm the only person such a thing has happened to. Already stood out as a tall white dude. Didn't need the extra attention.